another exciting episode of Disruptive Talks by Devi Sansthan or Detox. And today we have a very insightful guest, an expert from his field, Mr. Gavin McCormack. Gavin, welcome to Detox. We're really delighted to host you today.
Hello, yes, I'm also delighted to be here. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be invited.
Absolutely. Today we will be discussing on newer approaches to empower literacy, a very insightful conversation on how literacy functions across countries, across lesser developed economies, across second, third world countries, and even first world countries, and how even adult literacy becomes something that is so concerned and that is so important to discuss around. We'll wait for about 2 to 3 minutes for the audiences to join. Until then, if you have any questions, if you have any queries, audiences, please feel free to drop in the comment section. Gavin, how's the day for you today?
The day is good. I've been writing a course today on social scenarios, so giving children a chance to step into the world of an adult and to take on big decisions in the place of a CEO or a politician or a parent, and trying to build it into the curriculum so that children get a chance to understand what it's going to be like in the future, making those critical thinking decisions.
That's great. That's great. Have you been recently working on some projects across India?
I have, yes. I've been in India quite a lot recently, actually. I've just been in Nasik, working with Rise Experiential School, with a good friend of mine, Megha Aju. She's been doing a wonderful job, experiential learning over there, and seeing miracles happen, really, just absolutely mind-blowing, especially across India. Bangalore also, some lovely work down there with in an ashram last month, doing some work with the children in an ashram. But yeah, I've been working across India for about 5 or 6 years now, so one of my favorite countries, in fact.
That's great, and I wish you all the luck for it. Users joining Amna, hi. It's no worry. This session would be available on YouTube, on LinkedIn, all platforms after we have ended the live. So you don't have to worry about the recording. You're good to go. Let's start with a brief introduction to Mr. Gavin. Of course, by the time more audiences join, we will be talking about who Mr. Gavin is and what all has he been up to in his life. And there's a lot of things. There's a list of things, and I am personally very inspired and also very motivated after I read his bio. So he's the founder of educationinfluence.com and also the co-founder of upschool.co. These initiatives we'll talk a lot more about to Gavin today, and we're really excited to know about them. He is also the Australian Montessori ambassador, and he's recognized globally as a change maker. Gavin is passionate about teaching and pedagogy and has taught for over 2 decades in several countries across the world. Gavin has also conducted hundreds of teacher training workshops in schools across the globe, including the UK, France, Australia, and Nepal. And in Nepal, he's also the principal of the Kathmandu International Montessori Training Center, the Butwal Montessori Training Center, and Kalanki Montessori Training Center. So a lot of training, a lot of experience, a lot of expertise there. Absolutely going to love talking about it. As a published children's author, Gavin was also nominated for the Australian Author of the Year 2017, and he's also a very famous and renowned TEDx speaker, Principal of the Year finalist for the year 2020, and the Australian LinkedIn Top Voice for 2023. Well, that's a lot of swords in just one package, Gavin. We're really, really excited for this.
It's embarrassing to hear you say those things, but yes, thank you for reeling them all off. All the work that I do is not for me; it's for the children. So that's yes, all good.
Absolutely. So let's start this discussion. I think we're on a good time to begin it on the newer approaches to empower literacy. Before discussing the newer approaches, let's discuss of the changes or the innovations that you've seen in the current setup of education across. Would you like to open this discussion up by discussing those changes or innovations, Gavin?
I think that it's interesting as I've visited so many countries now and visited so many schools that there is a disparity across the world of what those changes look like, and different countries are shifting at different speeds, as it were. In my opinion, some are going too quickly and some are going too slowly. It's finding that common middle ground, which I think is the perfect way to go. But I think obviously some of the innovations that we're starting to see around the world are obviously including technology. There's no question about that. And, if we want to go all the way to the current, last few months with AI, but we'll get to that in just a second. But, just some of the basics. If you're going to a school in Nepal, in rural Nepal, you're really not going to be finding any electricity. So things like laptops, things like iPads, things like interactive whiteboards or screens, they're just non-existent. But then you might travel to some of the most expensive schools in the UK where every child has a laptop, every child has an iPad, there's a computer lab, an interactive, and so they have everything. And it's really interesting to see how those two work in actual fact, because there's a benefit of both of those ends of the spectrum. And I
Right.
think that the ideal situation is to find this beautiful middle ground. But if we look at what's happening with AI at the moment, you're finding that children are often stifled with ideas of where to go and what to write, and that's not their fault. That's to do with the delivery of the lesson or the inspiration that's come from the teacher or the
Absolutely.
curriculum. It's usually not the teacher in actual fact. It's usually what's written in the curriculum, and then that's a doctrine where the head of the the committee or the school board or the principal says you must say the words in the curriculum to those kids. Do not go off piece, do not go left field. Stay on track and say those words to the children. Children often find that very, very boring, and you can see there's no inspiration there. You can understand that if I told you to write a story about a tomato that moved a Mars, that's not interesting to you. Maybe that's not what you want to write about. And that comes to, student agency and making it more personalized. And so this is where technology comes in really well, because it adds this amazing inspiration that's not normally there. Normally, we're subscribed to one textbook with one story by Roald Dahl who says this thing, or a history story about Gandhi who walked from here to there. Now you're going to write this, or now you're going to write a report on that. But suddenly, with the internet and with recent movements in AI, you have the whole world at your fingertips now.
Absolutely.
You can go on to ChatGPT 4 and ask it to draw you a picture in the style of Picasso of any event in history ever. And you can then look at that picture and then you can write about it. So suddenly, what children can imagine can become real in pictures, and pictures can become stories, and stories are clearly writing. And that's the same for history, depending on what we're writing about. But I think when we look at technology and when we look at how things are shifting, there's a move away from the old textbook style teaching. There is a shift away from that. But if we shift too quickly into just technology and just using that as the catalyst, we miss out on that personalized part of it, which is what the children actually want. They want to have agency over what they write about, what style they write in, what voice they choose. And when you let that flow, then you see that children really take hold of it. They really do. But when we try to control everything as teachers because we want an outcome, because our rubric says we must have these things, or the assessment criteria are these things, then we stifle their creativity. So there is a shift. It is towards technology, but I think we shouldn't go there too quickly and use it 100%.
Right. And I think this also reminds me of how, because of technology, children's curiosities run a specific like they're shaped a specific or a certain way because that's how they're imagining the world now, because it's so accessible to them. It's so easily clickable. Like I remember as a child, a phone wasn't as accessible to me, and that I say like as a as almost like a millennial. But I think today's children that way have a lot of curious eye for technology out there, don't you think? Like the that curiosity also builds up to a lot of changes, doesn't it?
Oh, there's no question about that. I mean, that curiosity towards technology is just something that, we've always been driven towards as human beings. You know, Technology goes all the way back thousands of
Right.
years to just simple tools. But as soon as we knew we could use tools, we wanted to use them. And there is a pushback actually to technology in education. Because what you'll find is that teachers get scared of change, like anybody in any industry, and suddenly there's a new thing implemented into the sphere. AI appears, or it's Zoom, or whatever it is, and that's quite scary sometimes. And the fear that our teachers have is that our students get to know how to use it quicker than our teachers. And so, personally speaking, I like to embrace new technology very quickly, and try it, and get ahead of the game. Because if we don't, our children will get there way before us, and then we won't have a kind of a foothold in understanding and controlling how to use these
Right.
things. Because you know how it is. You give a child an iPad, 2 minutes later they've downloaded a new app, and they've spent some money on your credit card, and you're like, how did you do that? You've only had it for 2 minutes. So I think that as teachers and educationalists, and any people working in education, we need to embrace these things, because the more tools we have, the better the outcome will definitely be. But I'll go back to what I said before. We cannot rely on one system or one tool as the be all and end all. And I think the worst school I've ever walked in my life was when the principal took me around, and I won't name the school, obviously, and he showed me with great pride every classroom where every single child was on a laptop all day in every room. And I think that's a real failure, because there is something beautiful about drawing and creating and sticking glue, and making something and then writing about it, or touching something and igniting your senses and then writing about it. And so we can't just go towards technology as the system that's going to solve all our problems, because it's actually
Obviously the
not.
hands-on experience always stays as the most important or essential experience to a child, right? But even then they're tech savvy, they're smarter, like one of our audiences said just in the comments that also when we were talking about the iPhone or the iPad example, somebody in the comments said children are tech savvy, they are smarter than a smartphone today. So that does make a lot of sense when you think about it, right?
Yeah, but the smartphone is also designed for children to be able to use it very
Right.
simply. A lot of the apps that are out there, they're very addictive, and they're designed to be addictive. They don't want children to put them down. The more time they spend on them, the more money they make on advertising. And so, why would they want that to happen? We have to be very vigilant on how it's used in our homes, in our schools, and outside of the school environment. But yeah, I completely agree with what the viewer has said. They are smarter than a smartphone, and let's try and keep it that way.
Absolutely. This also reminds me to move a little bit towards the approaches that we're discussing here, given that technology is a context. What new things or what new approaches, as per your experience, you think could be utilized more to empower literacy in areas that are the need that need literacy? I'm not talking about maybe
Yeah,
a very accessorized or privileged institution where literacy is being imparted, but I'm talking about areas where it's
yeah,
actually needed on the ground and there is no sort of facility for people to be literate.
yeah.
What approaches do you think could be applied
So,
there?
now I was looking forward to this question when you sent me through the questions last week, because I have two amazing stories, and I have real anecdotal and physical evidence of this being real. So I was a school principal for 5 years, and my approach to education is similar to many other people's, but very different to most. The textbook is something I would never even open. In fact, I would just put them all in the bin and set fire to them immediately. Let's burn those things. That's my approach to it. But making literacy real is the most important. So I want to just give you an example of what that looks like, because on every curriculum on the planet, the NEP 2020, the IB, the Montessori, the Cambridge, the Oxford, doesn't matter which one you go to, you will find very similar themes in literacy. One of those, and everybody will agree, is writing a persuasive text. So writing a persuasive text, for those people who don't know, and maybe I'm sure you know too, is writing a letter or writing some kind of document that will persuade somebody to do something. Okay. Now, in most schools in the world, this is what happens. The children will learn about modality, about emotive language. They will learn about punctuation, grammar, sentence structure, and how to write a letter. And then they will write a letter to their school principal about changing the school uniform, putting chocolate in the canteen, or having longer playtimes. You wrote the letter when you were at school, and so did I. And the letter never found its way to the principal. In fact, it stayed in your book and it went on the shelf, and your teacher ticked it. So the child has worked really hard to learn all of those concepts, really hard. And then they write this amazing letter to change something in their school. The principal never reads it, and nothing changes in the school. So the child, although they won't vocalize this, feels this defeat. Like, I put all that time, 10 weeks, into learning all those skills and doing all that hard work and writing everything so perfectly, and nobody even read it apart from my teacher. She put a tick, and it's on the shelf. Nothing has changed. So let's think about that same lesson, but let's just twist it and make it real. So we say to our children, children are going to learn about persuasive texts. Now, there are 17 SDGs, Sustainability Goals for the World. They're in the NEP 2020. We
Right.
know that, right? Choose one. Choose one that matters to you. And one child says, gender equality matters to me, or zero hunger matters to me, or educational equality matters to me. Great. Now we're going to find somebody who can help us make a change in the actual real world, in the thing that matters to you. Go and research. You've got an hour. Find somebody who is real, who can help us make a change. So a child finds a local minister, the minister for, for education. So everyone finds somebody, and now the children use all those skills, modality, punctuation, persuasive devices, all those things, and they write a real letter. Now, the teacher doesn't mark it, doesn't tick it, there's no grades, there's no points. But every child posts their letter, goes to the post box, they all walk down the street, put it in an envelope, the school has to buy the stamps or however that works, and they post them. And the children wait. And the result is, if their letter was good enough, if it was persuasive enough, if it had the right punctuation, was long enough, and had the right persuasive devices, then the person you wrote to will reply, will turn up at your school, will make a phone call, will somehow be involved in what you want to happen. Now, some children won't get a letter back because their letter wasn't good enough. And so they'll learn about determination. They'll write again and again and again. They'll do 50 letters until he does reply. And so what I'm trying to say here is, you make it real, and the grades that the children get, the success criteria is, did something happen because of the work that you did? Did something change? And if something changed, well, you succeeded. And then their senses are ignited, their heart is out on the table, their emotions are ignited too, and they realize the power that they have by using the education they've got to make the world a better place. And so it's very easy to make that shift. You just need to be the teacher that thinks a bit like
Right.
that. It's not so hard, but you will find, and I've run a school like this, when ministers have turned up at my school because children have written letters to them, or they've been in the cockpit of a jumbo 747 flying the plane because they'd written to the head of Qantas saying, my dream is to become a pilot. And so when children realize, or when one child succeeds in their writing, the rest of the children realize, oh my goodness, with a piece of paper and a pen, I can literally do anything. And that's what we need to bring to our children, 100%. It's not a new approach, but it's something that's missing around the world. It's very easy to implement, doesn't cost any money, just needs a bit of thinking around it, a bit of freedom for your children, some agency, and bingo, you've got it in your hand.
Absolutely. That's also very interesting to note, because you now engage the child in a much more personalized sense, right? Because they start thinking on their own, they start developing a conscience of their own, and that's how I think it goes on and on with regards to doing better. Do you have any examples to share on this? On this, as we were talking, that you have anecdotes. Do you have any examples or any instances where you saw the students actually, more of going ahead and escalating their curiosity, escalating their insights with these.
Yeah. Well, look, when we talk about literacy, literacy is not just writing, it's not just reading, it's speaking, it's comprehension, it's understanding, it's persuading. There's a plethora of skills that are in literacy, as you
Right.
know. And I'll share an amazing anecdote with you, which will always makes me cry. And if I had slides to show you, everybody in this meeting would definitely be in tears. But there were four girls in my school, and they came to my office and said, Gavin, because in my school we called each other by their first names, even though I was the principal, because equality was very important to me and equity. And they said, Gavin, we have been researching continents, and we've discovered in Myanmar there are some Rohingya Muslims who are being persecuted, and we want to do something about it. And I said, right, it sounds great. I love this idea. What are your plans? And they said, Gavin, can we borrow
Okay.
$500 from you? And I said, you definitely can't borrow $500, but there are many ways in which you can get $500. Why would you like $500? And they said, some of the refugees from Myanmar are coming to Australia, and their children, they've lost their families. We want to help them. On their first day in Australia, we want to give them everything they need for their first day in school. So I said, this is an amazing initiative. I love it so much. Come back tomorrow when you've figured out how to get $500. So the next day, they came in and they'd made a poster. And this poster was for a bake sale. And they wanted the entire school to bake cakes and come into school and sell them and give them all the money, because they wanted to buy some backpacks, ask the parents to fill these backpacks with things that they didn't need from their house: rulers, shoes, a dictionary, a lunchbox, books, socks, anything they didn't need. Bring them in, collect them all, and give them to the refugees when
Wow.
they arrived. And I thought, this is just a gorgeous initiative, but very, very hard to actually execute. Now, the way that I ran my school was, I am just a guide. I do not tell you what to do, but I can help you, but I won't do any of the work. If you fail, that's totally fine. We learn from failure a great deal. So this is how it ran. The girls came in the next day. They had their bake sale. They raised $700, right? Their posters were, obviously, literacy is used in persuasive posters. They've got their posters. They went class to class persuading the children to bring in cakes and buns and cookies and whatnot. And then with the $700, they bought a series of backpacks off the internet. I've got to admit, I did that part for them. Okay, I had to, because it was a transaction with money over the internet. Anyway, backpacks arrived, and the girls invited some of the mums, influential mums, into the school, and then they persuaded them to assist them in what they're about to do. So the mums were persuaded. They had a slideshow, the girls, on PowerPoint. They persuaded the mums, this is conversation, this is speaking and listening, this is persuasive text, this is everything you need. The mums then agreed, and they went away. Now, every day for the next 2 weeks, the girls and the mums stood outside the school with the bags, persuading families to take these bags home and fill them up and bring them back. And they used really emotive language. Do you know what's happening in Myanmar? How would you feel if you were a refugee? All the bags went home, and all the bags came back. 700 of them, filled with everything you can dream of: dictionaries, shoes, socks, books, rulers, everything you can dream of. But the bags were 7,000 kilometers away from where the refugees were going to arrive. I'm in Sydney, and they were arriving in Darwin. It's a long way away. I said, girls, you haven't succeeded yet. They said, Gavin, we need to use the telephone. I said, okay, you can use the telephone. Tell me who you're going to call. They said, the CEO of a charity organization. We want to ask him if he can come to school. We want to interview him. They called the CEO, a grown man who's 65. These girls are 10 years old. They persuaded him to come to our school. They interviewed him. He brought his bus, and he took all the bags to Darwin, 7,000 kilometers, and delivered them. 1 month later, I received an email from the owner of this charity, and it was a video of the refugees arriving in Darwin, lost their mums, they lost their dads, and they were handed a backpack by four girls who had a notion of trying to help the world using literacy and using their power of the skills that they had. And the video was so heartbreaking because it was so happy. The children, although they lost everything, suddenly they knew somebody cared about them and was thinking about them. And we were crying, I was crying, the kids were crying, it was all tears everywhere. But what happened there was we gave them agency over how they use their literacy. You use it how you wish. I will be here to guide you. If you fall down, that is fine. If you succeed, we will all learn from that. And that's just one story of 1,000 I could tell you, but gorgeous. And that's how literacy, how powerful it can be.
Absolutely, that's very inspiring. I mean, when you said of how the distance has been covered so much, and just with the knack of helping people, just with the knack of making another bunch or another community literate, it's very inspiring to see that way. And before, I mean, this reminds me of how pedagogies work in a certain structure with regards to spreading literacy. But I think before we move on to that part of the discussion, let's hear it from you on Upschool and what's been going on in Upschool and what is it all about.
Okay, well, that's a nice. Thank you for bringing up school into it. It's my baby. Myself and my co-founder Richard Mills. We founded the organization together 2 years ago. I was a school principal before that. I left that job to do this work, and the idea is that we bring a real, purposeful, as I've just explained to you, education that where something happens at the end of it. So children still follow the curriculum. They're still in the boundaries of your curriculum, of the Indian curriculum, of the English curriculum, of the Australian curriculum. But the outcome, the success criteria of all the work that they do is that something good happens in the world. It can be small. Their grandma can smile, that's good enough. They can plant a forest with 25,000 trees. That's also amazing. And the idea is that we have written 40 or 50 courses. Some are 10 weeks, some are 1 week, about all of these kind of things. So children get to take on some of the biggest projects in the world, but it's still within their classroom, within the confines of their room, in front of their teacher or at home. But what it does, it allows them to make a meaningful difference in the world. And I want to share with you, this goes into your third question, which is alternate literacy measures. I want to share with you, I hope you don't mind me going ahead into that
Yes,
question,
yes,
because
absolutely.
this is where
Let's go ahead.
it really takes hold here, because one of our courses is called Write a Book to Change the
Okay.
World. As I've just explained to you, in every curriculum on the planet, children write a story. And what happens? It goes on the shelf with a tick. Nothing happens to that story. It might somehow find its way onto the parent's fridge at home, if they're lucky. But usually it sits on a shelf in a book with a tick and nothing happens. Now, I'm a children's author. I've written lots of children's books. So I wanted to give the children a chance to do the work of writing a story, but something amazing happen in the world at the same time. So this course is just remarkable. First of all, the children get to choose their mission on the story. What is their value they're going to choose? Is it empathy, love, determination, passion? Is it hope? Is it fear? What is the value they're choosing? And then they write their own manuscript. I help them along the way. I teach the whole time. They write their own manuscript, and then they illustrate it using Canva. Now, every single child who enrolls in Upschool gets a free Canva Pro account. Every child, every teacher, which is amazing. And we have hundreds of thousands of children already on the platform. They illustrate their own book. They do the front cover, the back cover, the blurb, everything. It looks like a book you would buy in a. Here's the magic.
Right.
Finish, they press publish. And when they press publish, the website tells them, hey, before we publish your book and put it onto the Upschool library, by the way, we have thousands of books. Before you publish it, if somebody buys a copy of your book, now we print it, we ship it, but if somebody buys a copy of your book, where would you like the profit to go? Here are 12 charities around the world that you can make the profit go to. We divert it to them. So a little boy in Bangalore, his name was Divyam Malpani. He wrote, no, not from Calcutta. He wrote a book. He went onto the platform. He sold hundreds of copies. And what happened was he diverted the money to a foundation in Indonesia called the John Fawcett Foundation that saves children who are blind and enables them to see. Now, he sold lots of copies and he raised a lot of money for that charity. In fact, about 40 children in the first month who were blind could then see thanks to him. So I met him on Zoom when he was 12. And I said to him, Divyam, do you know what you've done? He said, I've written a story. I said, you've done more than that. I said, you've actually allowed lots of children to be able to see again who were blind by just doing your work. And he started crying in the meeting. I said, don't cry. And he said, I have to go now. And I said, don't go. And he said, I have to go. I have to write another story. And that's what's so pertinent about this, because suddenly his story could make the world better, he was going to write as many stories as possible, because it was make there were, you know, no tick, no point, no score, no ranking, no top of the class is ever going to supersede you've just made a child who was blind be able to see, or you've just planted 16 trees, or you've just saved a girl in Uganda who was going to be sold in slavery, now she's going to school. Like, we're giving children a chance to feel what it feels like to do good.
Right.
I've done a lot of philanthropy work in my life, and I know how good it feels to do good in this world. And our children need to feel it from a very early age. And so Upschool is literally an online education platform that's completely free. It's I write all the content. I'm very proud of what we've created, but the big twist in the tale is that it allows children to feel how good it is to do good. And just recently, Dr. Snail Pinto's listening. We just signed up every single child in the Ryan group. That's every single child in the whole network. So I'm very proud of our place in India. India has a big place in our heart, and we've aligned all of our curriculum with the NEP 2020 for that reason. So yes, it's kicking goals. I'm loving it. I'm so happy with what we've produced and what's happening. So thank you for bringing it up.
Right. Also, very not just insightful. I think it comes with a lot many observations as well. Speaking of observations here, let's actually discuss a little more in detail with regards to the efficacy or the efficiency of the alternate methods that we are talking about of spreading literacy. As you also mentioned that at App School also you implement a lot of them. Um, what do you think is the efficiency or the efficacy of such methods with regards to a real life implication?
Well, look, I'm a Montessori teacher, right? I was a mainstream teacher for 15 years. I retrained. I did a Montessori. So I've seen both sides of the coin here. And I must admit, I I used to be the teacher that just wanted to control the class. If the class was silent and they were listening to what I said and they wrote down what I told them, then I was a good teacher. Because my principal told me that that's what he expected of me. When
Yeah.
I come down the corridor, if your classroom is quiet, then I'm happy with you. And if you get those grade A's, then you're a good teacher. And I thought I was doing a good job. And then I discovered Montessori, and I realized I was doing a terrible job for 15 years. And so,
I might disagree on that, but please go on. Yeah.
yeah, well, I was trying my best, but I was doing a bad job. I wasn't giving the children the respect that I should have given them. Now, there is some criticism around on alternate methods where you give them absolute freedom,
Hmm.
to do whatever they like. And Montessori has that stigma, which is false actually, where, oh, in Montessori, children do whatever they want and no one gives them any guidance. Well, that's not true in actual fact. There's a whole lot of guidance behind it. But there is lots of research around this. What I would say is best practice is, once again, a hybrid, somewhere in the middle.
Hmm.
Children need boundaries, they need guidelines, they need rules, they need to know where they're going. You can't just let them all run free, otherwise, nothing will happen.
Correct.
And so, if you look at some of the, I mean, let's take Airbnb. You know Airbnb, one of the biggest companies on the planet.
Correct. Yeah.
You go into their office, if you go into their head office in San Francisco, what do you see? You don't see people sitting down in rows, silently putting their hand up to go to the toilet. You see sitting on the floor, working outside, working in groups. They've got hubs, spaces. They go for lunch whenever they like. There's no time frames. They come and go as they please. And what do you get? Innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship, development. You get all these wonderful things happening. So we know that sitting in rows in silence and putting your hand up to go to the toilet doesn't work in actual fact. That's going back to Victorian era, when we were trying to get children ready to go into a factory, clock in, clock out, and go home and come back the next day.
Right.
So we're not looking at that anymore. So what we're trying to do now, what we should be doing, in my opinion, is giving our children a really inspirational start to our lesson in literacy. Let's say that you're going to write a story, right? Let's say you're writing a story. What the teacher should be doing at the very instant is telling the children the most inspirational story they have ever heard in their life. And even better, make it about you. Make it really real. Tell them something that you did which is true and inspirational. Doesn't have to be happy. It can be sad, or you overcame something, or when you were bullied at school, but it has to be real, and it has to be inspirational, because your job as the teacher is to be not the teacher, but the guide or the inspirer. You've got to
Right.
get them motivated to want to write. And so the first instance is inspire. The second instance, and I did a course on this just the other day, the first instance is inspire. The second part is to question, ask them, what would you like to write about? And so the children start putting their hands up, and you give them a chance to really write their own curriculum. I'm going to write about a tomato that goes to space. Tell me why. Well, actually, my uncle is an astronaut, and I know a lot about space. And I actually went to SpaceX to see a rocket take off. And I know that the Indian government just launched a rocket to the south pole of the moon. And suddenly that child's telling you more than you can possibly imagine. They're telling you who they are, what they love, and what they know, and what inspires them straight away. They're also inspiring the other children in the class to take hold of their own thoughts and say, well, if he can write about what he wants, I don't need to be scared about writing. I'm actually going to write about cats because I love cats, and suddenly it's okay to be you in the class. And now everybody in the room is inspired and now writing about something which matters to them, rather than opening your textbook to page 42 and now you're going to write a story about a Martian that goes to, whatever.
Right.
You're not going to get agency at that point. And then when the children, so number one, inspire. Number two, question. Number three, let them go. And let them go means now set your children free. You don't have to control them anymore. Let them move. Let them sit together in pairs. Let them collaborate, communicate, work on the floor, stand up, go to the bathroom when they want, work at their own pace, and finish their story. We're using a story here as an example. And when it's complete, the last part is the children share. They share their stories, they share their reflection, how they feel. How did they feel when somebody else read their story? What does somebody else think about your story or your speech or whatever it is that you're doing, your slideshow presentation, doesn't matter. But using that methodology really allows your children to have ultimate freedom. And you can see it's not absolute chaos. There is control, there's order. I'm going to inspire, I'm then going to question, you're going to be free, I'm going to observe, then we're going to reflect. Like, that's a very simple process.
That's also
Very simple.
that's also an awesome process to actually engage a child, because you need to streamline the sort of conscience that child has. And I think with this approach, they do it absolutely amazingly. Yeah, please go on. Yeah.
Sure. But don't forget that there's also going to be some children that have no ideas. No ideas at all.
Right.
In fact, they're too scared. They're too scared to write, right? They're too scared to put pen to paper for fear of making a mistake because maybe their father at home has really punished them for making mistakes and they're petrified of making mistakes. Or mother, it doesn't matter, grandma, granddad. I'm not persecuting fathers. But so when you let them go, the little boy who's scared of writing, he sits with a boy who's very confident and he writes the same story as him, right? That's not a problem because he doesn't have the confidence yet to write. But this boy that he's writing with is now going to be his confidant and allow him to build that confidence. And so there's so many positives for this kind of workflow in a classroom. But the last thing I will say is it's also fun for the teacher.
Right.
And that's what's really important. I'm finding this fun talking to you because I get to tell you what I think, right? It's my story. The camera's on me. This is fun. Suddenly, the camera's on the teacher, and the teacher gets to choose something which she loves.
Right.
Let me tell you about a time when I went on a hot air balloon in Turkey with my husband, and it crashed, something like this. And the children, it's so inspiring for everybody. And it gives agency to your teachers, agency to your students. I mean, to me, I've seen this work a million times. I've also done teacher training all over the world using this. And when you say this to teachers, a light bulb goes on their head and they go, oh my goodness, I'm doing that tomorrow when I go to school.
Right. It's these little moments that, remind you of also that there is a newer sort of wave or a newer foundation or a flare towards, strengthening literacy this way. Because I think more, it also is a collaborative effort, right, between students, between teachers and students, largely of these thoughts. Um, Something that you were mentioning in your last response also, while talking of, reaching a certain, when a teacher sort of dictates you to go this page, this section, this particular note. That reminds me of how rote learning has been imparted all across. I mean, some for some people for all their lives of how they learn or how they gain knowledge for that matter. What is the scope that you see of this shift from from the rote learning to the what we were just discussing about the student led and student driven learning, where they are actually curious about what they're learning?
And yes, amazing question. I don't want to sound like someone who's saying the same thing over and over again, but I will say that I think a hybrid approach is the perfect approach, and I will tell you why. There are some people completely on the left, some are all the way to the right. Some are like textbooks only, silence, do not speak, speak when I tell you to speak, and some that are like absolute freedom, do whatever you want, whenever you want. I don't think either of those are correct. There are some things that you just cannot learn unless somebody tells you.
Right.
Unless someone tells you how to add two fractions with different denominators together, you're not going to know how to do that.
Absolutely.
Unless someone sounds out the phonemes of ch and th and oo and sh, if you don't hear that, you're never going to know it. And so you need to know it. So there are some occasions where the teacher needs to give direct teaching. There's no question about that. I'm going to show you how to, section your paragraphs out. I'm going to show you the structure of a letter. I'm going to show you where you put your address when you want the person to respond to you. All these things, somebody has to demonstrate that. You can't just learn it from nowhere. So there has to be teacher-led, teacher-directed learning. But at the same time, you also need to give agency to your students, because if you don't, they will never find their way. They will never find their niche. They will wait a very long time. So, for example, if you're looking at geography and literacy are very closely linked, as you can imagine. You have to do a lot of report writing. There's a lot of evaluation, a lot of understanding needs to take place, comprehension, reading, speaking, and listening, all of that stuff. But within the confounds of geography, you have such a wide scope of things that you can possibly learn. So let's say, for example, that in my curriculum, and here in Australia we have this, in the curriculum it says you will teach Antarctica. It's suggested to teach Antarctica in the topic of continents, right? But there are 7 continents, right? Now, I will need to tell the children what a continent is. I will need to explain the tectonic plates and how they shifted from Pangea to becoming, all these different continents all over the world, and how things move and how earthquakes happen and volcanoes.
Correct.
I'll need to directly teach that,
Correct.
right? Because otherwise, if I don't, it's not going to be imparted as knowledge. But then I need to give agency to my students. I need to say to them, now, you can choose a continent that matters to you.
Mm.
And I want you to find out, a volcano on that continent, when the last earthquake was, and, maybe some of the different biomes I might find on the land, okay? Or
Right.
different habitat. A child whose grandfather is Chinese, right, and comes from Shanghai will say, I'm actually going to choose Asia because my grandfather's Chinese and I have all these old books at home that he gave me and I want to use them as part of my research. Another child might say, well, actually, I was born in America. I'd love to do North America because there's some amazing rocks up there in the Rockies. And, we've got Yosemite and I want to study blah, blah, blah. And then when you do that, they have agency and they're now in the mix. They want to learn because they got to choose rather than me telling them it's Antarctic because I said it because the curriculum says it. And then when you reflect, everybody gets to learn from everybody else, and all the 7 continents are now covered. It's not just one continent.
Right.
Because you might choose North America, and when you come back, you say, hello, everybody. I've made a presentation on North America and the geographic landscapes. I'm going to show it all to you now. Your confidence is boosted. Your speaking, listening skills are increasing straight away. And everybody in the class learns about North America, including me, the teacher.
Right.
This is a knowledge, we call it a knowledge exchange, and it should be a knowledge exchange between everybody in the room. So, in answer to your question, I think that there is a part for both of these things, but they need to be managed carefully, and they can't just go to one or the other. As I said about technology, you can't just go one way or the other.
Right.
I hope that answers the question and that kind of makes sense to your listeners.
It does. It does. I think we've also been getting a lot of comments regarding this itself. There are our beautiful audience joining in from Iran, Pakistan, India, Australia, a lot many places, and I think they do agree with a lot of ideas of what we're discussing, because this knowledge base is very important as we speak of it, right? Regarding this only, Gavin, we have a question in the comments from one of our listeners. They want to know that you've seen the first-hand divide between mainstream and alternative education. How do you see the gap being bridged for public schools globally in that context?
Two things. The first thing is public schools are really trying very hard to shift. Teachers, I mean, I've worked with lots of schools. Teachers want to teach in this way. They really do. They want to give the children freedom. They want to observe the children. They want to have agency over what they teach, but they are trapped. They are trapped in a system where a university is looking for a certain grade. So a high school has to provide a certain grade so the children can go to a certain university. And therefore, the primary school must provide a certain grade so the children go to a certain high school and then go to the certain university and get a certain job. And so you're trapped in this awful wheel. It's a hamster wheel of grades, points, scores, and percentages. And it's hard to break free from that because those expectations are very stringent. I think until our universities start to look at alternative ways of assessing their intake, we're not going to see any change because this wheel that we're stuck in will not shift. But we do know that the biggest industries in the world, we look at tech, we look at ed tech, we look at things like SpaceX, Google, Amazon, Wikipedia, Airbnb. They are not looking for grades, points, scores anymore. They're looking for skills and they're looking for life experience because they're getting a trillion resumes on their desk with 100% grade A. I'm a top of the school, XYZ. And they get you in the interview and they want to see skills and life experience.
Right.
So there will be a shift. There will be some change. Change in education takes time, of course, but I think teachers do want to move. They're just trapped in this terrible wheel of the curriculum. Say these words to those kids, get them to write it in their books, mark them, give me the grades. Yes, that's all good.
Absolutely. That's also, I think, very helpful with regards to bridging the gap, because public schools do face, I think, a slight bit of that issue where there's a connection problem. There is a problem with connecting to each other, but also connecting to the teacher at large. So I think these measures can surely help in that.
Yep. And can I just say one more thing?
Yes.
And I don't want to pitch too much here, but I know this. I've gone from mainstream to Montessori and I've worked in schools throughout India. And I heard many times over the years, Gavin, I love these ideas. I love it, but I'm just not going to be allowed to do this, right?
Why is
Even though it's not, because, if a principal is walking down the corridor
that? Right.
and children are moving around and talking, some are working on the floor, there's conversation happening, then that teacher, in some instances, is scared that's going to look that she is a bad teacher or he is a bad teacher. So having control, and until our leaders change their mindset over what expectations look like, then that's not going to shift at all. How can you have an innovative classroom where children are choosing, questioning, exchanging ideas, having a knowledge exchange when they can't move, when they can't talk, when they're putting their hand up to go to the toilet? I mean, just think about that thing, putting your hand up to go to the toilet. Your brain and bladder have been communicating for millennia, right? They know how to communicate very well. When your bladder is full, your brain will say, go to the toilet. So if you want your children to have agency, you say, I trust that your body functions okay. If you need to go to the bathroom, just excuse yourself and off you go. You do not need my permission. We need to let go of these archaic rules. And if we don't, our children are never going to trust us enough to show their true colors and flourish and fly and be who they want to be because they're too scared of getting something wrong. They're too scared. And so, we've got to change. And so those rules are hard and they're enforced by the people who run the schools, unfortunately. And therefore, we need to let go.
Right.
We actually need to have more faith in our children. 70% of everything you will ever learn is in before you are 7 years old. That's a fact. Neurological science will tell you this. 70% of everything before 7. you can trust them to go to the toilet. You can trust them to choose their own story. You can trust them to go to the art cupboard and get some card. And yes, there will be mistakes. People will go to the bathroom and they will mess around.
Absolutely.
People will go to the art cupboard and use all the card. People will go and write their own story about something inappropriate. But we also know that if you don't make mistakes, you learn zero. And so we need to do that. This is a
Right.
fact. And so this is the conundrum we're sitting in.
Right, and I think parents also play a very crucial role in this bit, as long as teachers too, because they are certainly also kind of a certain conditioning is being passed to them, and it's very important that that conditioning itself is also very aware and very free flowing, right?
Sure. I mean, they went to school, so they think that's how school is. There's, the old anecdote when a child comes home and says, "Dad, I did my maths test today," and Dad goes, "How did you go?" And he goes, "I got 18 out of 20." And Dad says, "Let's go through the two that you got wrong."
Ah,
And the child says, "No, let me tell you about the 18 that I got right."
yes,
And it's that old mindset of focusing on what you got wrong rather than, and that was an old. It's not like that anymore.
yes,
Now we learn from our mistakes, so focus on the things you got right, and then worry about the ones you got wrong later on. And it's like kind of the old, understanding of what education should be is now gone. So our school's responsibility is to actually upskill our parents,
absolutely.
because the average child will spend about 150 hours per month in school, but 550 hours at home per month. So look at those numbers. I know they're asleep a lot at home, but they have to go to bed. They have to wake up in the morning, have their breakfast in the car at the weekends. A lot of learning takes place at home, and therefore our teachers, our schools, and our parents need to be all in synergy with each other to know what's happening.
Right, that synergy is really important to achieve what we're looking for with regards to, the real meaning of literacy. Moving on from this discussion a little bit, as we've been discussing a lot about children literacy and early childhood and, Montessori's and how children go ahead and get to grow to become curious. Let's move the discussion a little bit about adult literacy, because I think as much as foundational literacy and numeracy is an issue for or is a concerning point for children or for the budding future, it is also a really big issue in most of the countries with regards to how adults have not had the chance to be literate or numerate, right? Um, what do you think are some mechanisms to enable adult literacy in that context?
Look, there are many ways, of course. I think one of the best ways, and if we go to the extreme where a parent is illiterate, okay, and cannot read,
Right,
and cannot, can't understand text and comprehend, then the school plays a really important role there in two ways. Number one, just being around letters and words and speech and books and literature, just being around it will allow you to start to learn immediately without even having a teacher. So having that parent in and around school, in and around the classroom, in and around the lessons, welcoming them as another knowledge exchange where maybe the parent is helping doing the art, or she's helping with something else, or he's helping with something else. But being in the context of school where learning takes place, you will learn. There's no question about it. Number two, there is a village style that's coming out around the world where parents don't leave the school anymore. They actually stay at school for the whole day, and they do their work at school. So imagine a school where you go to school, you drop the kids in the class, but you go to this co-working space on the school campus. You don't have to leave.
right,
But the rule is, if you want to use the co-working space, you must give some of your services, some of your skills to the school. You must lend it to the school. Maybe you're a gardener, and so for 1 hour a week, you're going to do the gardening. Maybe you're a painter, you're going to do some painting. But for the rest of the time, you can work in the school. One of the things that you can do in that is literate parents can help non-literate parents become literate by giving their time. That can be part of this mechanism. And this village knowledge exchange type of school, in fact, we're building one in Costa Rica right now, like this, where it's basically a place for everyone. You don't need to leave. Everything you need is there. drop the kids in the class and go. And the kids, if they need you for any reason, they can book you. Maybe you're a web designer and I'm an accountant, and some children in year 7 need some help with a spreadsheet. Well, they won't need to go to the teacher or look online because they can book us. We'll give 1 hour of our time per week and they'll book us in. We'll go into the class and we will assist. This is a really good way to do it. It's knowledge exchange between families in the school campus, on grounds where learning takes place, not in a cafe, not at home where there's stigma, going to each other's houses, is a wonderful way to do it. But also, the last point is empowering your students to be the teacher. That's, imagine if homework was not fill in this worksheet.
Right.
Imagine if homework was, with what you've just learned in literacy today, you have to make the world a bit better. And one child says, I'm writing a letter to a politician. Another child says, I'm making a post about a bake sale. And another child says, I'm going to teach my mum how to read phonemes. And he makes a plan of how to do that as part of his literacy homework research project.
Right.
Empower the children to make a difference. Find someone who needs help, and that can be your mum, and it can be your dad. It doesn't matter. It can be your uncle, your auntie, your grandma. And if they teach their mum the alphabet or all the phonemes, or they can read a paragraph of a book, they've achieved. And that's enough. That success criteria has to be shifted if we want to see this move. And I will also say this. Our schools are usually petrified of parents coming in. They don't want them in. If you come in, you're going to see the books and you're going to see their work, and oh my goodness, I'm going to be in trouble. Maybe I've not done the work you wanted. They haven't got the grades that you expected. But the more we break down that frontier between home and school, and we have this beautiful transition of an open door where parents come in and they're all welcome, nothing to hide here. You're part of the education, so am I. We will see the people who benefit from that will be our students.
Right.
100%. Because they will know that we're all included in this thing that we call learning. It's at home, it's at school, it's in the classroom, nothing to hide, no wool pulled over anyone's eyes. This is something we're all involved in. And so there's a few things to change, but I think the world is starting to shift in that direction. That's certainly how I ran my school.
Okay.
It was exactly like that.
Really excited
And
to hear this.
I loved it so much. It was just a beautiful time where when children had to bring in a resource, sometimes they bring in their granddad, or their father. I brought my dad in, he's my resource. He flies a plane and I'm doing a project on aeroplanes, and dad would come in and work with him for the morning, and that was fine with us, no problem.
Right. Um, it makes me wonder so many things, and I think most of it is stemming from the fact that there is this newer wave, and I think the best sort of conclusion, or the best sort of learning that I'm taking from this discussion, is that learning essentially never stops. Even if you're a child or even if you're an adult, at any point in given time, you can enable literacy into the other individual who doesn't have it, enable numeracy into the other individual. And I think that's
Sure.
that's the most beautiful part about learning about these newer ways of empowering literacy, right?
100%. I mean, have you ever watched a David Attenborough documentary?
I haven't gotten the chance to yet, but I'll show you.
Okay, but you know these documentaries about the nature and the earth and how
Yes.
animals hunt each other and
Yeah.
plants communicate, all these things. Just see an adult watch one of those,
Right.
right? And watch how they stop speaking immediately because their wonder turns on. Their mind is suddenly, wow, I've never seen that before. That's incredible. And when you can switch that on in an adult or in a child, you have them. And then you can then direct that where you like. On the Upskill platform, we've traveled all around the world in the last 2 years. I've been to Antarctica, I've been to the North Pole, Costa Rica, I've even been to Bangalore to do a lesson on the largest banyan tree in the world, which is actually in Bangalore, which is gorgeous. But what we try to do is turn on that light of wonder in the child's mind. So, we traveled to the North Pole and we went looking for polar bears, and we found a polar bear walking on the ice. So we pulled up on the boat next to the polar bear, and then I started to teach. This week, we're learning all about apex predators. La, 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 la. I do my teaching, but over my shoulder, there is a polar bear, 700 kilos, 3 meters tall, raw. The children are like, oh my goodness, there's a polar bear. They're excited, they're inspired. And then what do? We divert them towards literacy, or we divert them towards mathematics, because There's always a cross-curricular theme to everything if you think
Everything.
hard enough. Everything.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter. You just have to think a little bit abstractly or outside the box. And that's how we at Upschool have woven in the mainstream curriculum with something which may seem very abstract to most teachers. I think it's very doable.
It is. It is very doable because, uh, of course, leading by the example is also something that helps in gathering more, as compared to when you just narrate it as a story, or when you just tell people that okay, A plus B plus C is D. Instead of that, I would rather say what is A, what is B, what is C, what is D, and then create that excitement, and that I think really holds on to.
Yeah, and you can actually step out of the limelight too. As a
Yeah.
teacher, you don't know everything.
Right.
You don't know everything. Maybe there's a child in the class who's had a way better life experience than you. I've had children who've come from Afghanistan as refugees, and they've traveled across the world. They've then gone by boat from Indonesia to Australia. They've been captured by the Indonesian Coast Guard. They've been taken in. They've been, all these things that have happened. They've got a story to tell. I need to give them a chance to tell their story if they want to. I need to give them a voice. If they want to turn that into something they write, then they can. But better than that, they will inspire the other people in the class to understand that it's okay to have your own story. It's okay to tell it, and it's okay to write it down if you wish. And so the teacher can then step out of the limelight. You don't have to be standing at the front all day as the oracle who knows everything,
Right.
because maybe you don't. Maybe someone in your class knows more than you, and they probably do in some cases.
Right, and I think those things help as well. I've been really intrigued and really happy seeing all the comments flowing in our comment section. I hope you're also able to see them, and how you know people are just sharing insights and also sharing examples of how what we're discussing is so important, how the village knowledge exchange plan or family engagement or foundational literacy becomes so important and in-depth topics. I really hate to bring this discussion to a close, but I think we have to conclude it at one point. Before we kind of conclude this, Gavin, I would like to know from you personally. You've worked with so many second, third world countries, and even first world countries across your experience, and you worked in so many regions also, given Nepal, given Kathmandu schools, and given Upschool. What would you think are your major learnings from all these regions and all these areas?
Wow, that's a very big question. I mean, I think that the first thing to say is that every teacher is doing their best, first of all, with what they can. They're trying, they're working very hard. They're often undermined, teachers, as I'm a teacher too, as oh, you just do the ABCs and play in the sandpit all day. That's just teaching, isn't it? No, you are a best friend, a psychologist, you are a teacher, an educator, a leader, a guide, a mentor, a physiotherapist. You're everything. You have thousands of roles to play as a teacher. It's not an easy job, but also you can't leave it. You can't leave your job at the end of the day. You can't leave it behind because you take all those hearts and minds and emotions home with you. It's very emotional job to have. You take it all with you home. But what I would say is that, and I said this, I'm recently started lecturing at a university, and I have these undergraduates, and they ask me, "What's your advice for us, Gavin, when we go out into the world of teaching?" And my advice is this: in your heart, you know what kind of teacher you want to be, because when you sign up for this job, you're not doing it for the money.
Right.
We're not rich. Teachers don't get rich. We just have enough cash and a cup of coffee. Teachers do not get rich, right? You're not doing it for the money. You're doing it for the love of this job, which is very important. So my advice, the thing that I've learned is, if you're working in a school that does not allow you to be the teacher you know you want to be, you need to go to a school where they will allow you to be. And that is the only way that education will actually shift. Because while we continue to do the job that we know is not in our heart, what we really want to do, then nothing will change. But if schools who are forcing this curriculum, textbook, sit down, hand up, toilet, march down the corridor. If schools like that are struggling to find teachers, they'll have to change the way that they teach if they want the best teachers. And so we are now in the minority. So we're now in the majority where people are desperate for teachers, being a mass resignation. We get to choose the jobs we want. We can pick our job. So I would say pick it carefully. And if you're in a job you don't like because it will not let your heart sing, teaching should be a job where your heart sings all day. You skip home happy, you skip to work in the morning excited. If that's not happening, you need to have a word with the school leadership and say, change something, or you need to go somewhere where you can be the teacher you've always wanted to be. And I just want to say I know you want to wrap up, but I want to say one final thing, which is really important to me personally in terms of literacy. I just went home to my hometown of Sheffield in England to see my father, and that's the place where I studied at university. And I approached the local council. I asked a meeting with the whole of the council, and they all turned up. And a good friend of mine turned up too to help me out with this. So it wasn't only my job. But I pitched to the council that there are 76,000 children in Sheffield, and I wanted every one of them to be a published author on the Upschool platform using Write a Book to Change the World.
Right.
And I read them. I read them in the meeting, one of the books that a child had read. Everybody in the meeting was crying. Everybody was crying. Tears. The book was called Anita Came on a Plane, and it was a girl had written a story about her journey as a refugee from Syria to Australia. And the book was 11-year-old girl wrote it. It was heart-wrenching, but it was true. And it was gorgeous. And it made your heart sing
Wow.
for lots of reasons. Because she got to choose the story she wrote. She got to choose the value she wanted to impart. She got to tell her own story. But fourthly, that so many people had read it and it had a meaning to them. And it was so powerful, this story, that the council have agreed that every single child, 76,000 of them in one town, my hometown, are all going to write a book to change the world in January. And we will have 76,000 stories told by 76,000 children that can potentially change the course of humanity. And I think in all of my life, that has been one of my greatest successes is what just happened last week. And my hope for anybody listening, and I can see the people in the chat here, I know lots of them, I know Ranjana very well, is that the people who are looking at this conference today, that they are going to say, you know what, I'm going to do the same thing. And they jump on the Upschool platform, they go and find it, they bulk upload their whole students, and they let them write their own stories and illustrate them and change the world because it's totally free. We put our heart into making it come to fruition. And that would be the greatest thing that could ever happen to me personally.
That's very inspiring, and I think that's 72,000, 73,000 is a massive number. I think that also shows of how much or how far you've come, Gavin, with your efforts. Because as you were mentioning, that if you really have it in you, if you really have the dedication to teach, or if you have, you know, if you have a rationale behind becoming a teacher, that's when you know that you have to do it. That's when you know that you have to decide it for it, and you not only become a teacher, then you also become the students' friend. You're a friend to whoever you're teaching, the learners, be it young children or being adult, learners. It's very important to be that friend, right?
No, it's true. And when I've seen this with my good friend Mega, ran Rise Exponential School, and Dr. Snail Pinto and Dr. Pretty Olja. They were very similar in the sense that they were on the ground level. The children could walk into their office and talk to them. They weren't in an ivory tower floating above the whole community saying, "Look at me, I'm the school principal." They were on the ground in the classroom, on their hands and knees, crawling around in kindergarten, getting their hands dirty. And
Right.
children, when you do that, children respect you and they feel
Absolutely.
that they have a place in your school. And when they have a place and they feel that they belong and there's trust, then real magic happens. I mean, we get
Absolutely.
no magic from fear. You do not get magic when people are scared. When you're scared, your reptilian brain switches on. You have literally zero creativity in your mind. All you want to do is run away. And so these kind of leaders in India that I've just spoke about, those three in particular, and there are many more, are the exemplars in this world. And so if we can There's so many things to do. There's so many puzzles and pieces to move around. As long as we're all moving forward and trying to change and understanding what our children want, then we'll see a world that's better than the world we have now. And the last thing I'll say, I'm sorry, the last thing I'll say is this: the true success of any educational facility is the citizens that walk on the street in 25 years. It's not your grades now. It's not your exams next week. You won't be able to sit under the shade of the tree you plant now, but somebody will. And they're the students that will be out in the community. And we have to think like that long term.
That is very important, because I think all efforts, even what we do at Devi Sansthan here about the accelerated learning process and the Alpha method, all such initiatives do show their fruit, at least 20 years down the lane or 25 years down the lane. And I'm very, very happy that we were able to discuss so much and so many things today, Gavin. All the audience that joined, and that's, right now, uh, thanking you, showing gratitude to you for being here, and, for talking about so many important things. They're all in awe, I think. And I'm myself personally very inspired by this discussion. I hate to really end this, but I think we reach the conclusion of this discussion today with all your lovely comments, with all your insightful thoughts, also the audience's support. We've had a really good response of people joining in today. And for more conversations like this, is to our audience, for more conversations like this, of course, you have Gavin in your networks, but please do follow Devi Sansthan on all social media platforms as well, so that we can stay connected and you can be a part of more conversations around literacy, around the importance of education, and about growing this transformative world called literacy and numeracy. So thank you so much, everyone. And Gavin, I'd love if you speak a few words and also stay before we like after we end the live stream. Anything that you'd want to add?
I just want to say thank you for having me. It's been amazing to be here. I really appreciate it. I love these kind of things, and thanks for allowing me to speak from my heart and not, it's amazing to see your questions are so open and allowing me just to say what I think. It's not always that way, and I think that's reminiscent of what I've been talking about: agency and having some choice over what you do. So thank you so much for having me, and a big thank you to Dr. Sunita Gandhi, who has become a dear friend of mine now. We've done a lot of work together. Shame she couldn't be here, but I'm sure that we will collaborate in the future. Thanks to everyone for coming. I'll say by finishing by saying this: if you need anything, you know where I am. Just go to upschool.co. There is a chat bot, and it's not a chat bot, it's actually me. So if you need anything, you just write it there, and I will help you however much I can. And well, it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for joining in. We'll be ending the live stream now. Have a great day.